Emily Carson had almost forgotten the feeling of getting ready for an evening that belonged to something other than work. Her life in Seattle had settled into a quiet, predictable rhythm. Late nights at her desk, weekends shared with coffee cups and novels, mornings that began and ended in the same calm silence. She wasn't unhappy. She was simply tucked beneath the comfort of routine, as though the rest of the world were a play she'd stepped away from. So when her best friend Claire called on Friday afternoon, pleading through the phone for her to come to a downtown art gala, Emily hesitated. "Come on." "Em?" Claire coaxed, laughter in her voice. "You haven't been anywhere in months. You need to remind yourself how to have fun again." Emily smiled faintly, swirling the last of her coffee as she stared out her office window. Maybe Claire was right. Maybe she did need to feel something different. By evening, she stood before her mirror, uncertainty and curiosity twined together in her reflection. The simple black dress hung softly against her figure. It had been a year since she had last worn it, and a subtle shade of lipstick added warmth to her face. Not bold, just enough to make her look like someone who remembered herself again. Her pulse quickened. The small step of stepping out had already begun to change something inside her. Seattle glimmered that night. Streets were halos of reflected light, the scent of rain threading through the hum of traffic. When Emily arrived at the gallery, warmth and movement rushed to meet her. The room buzzed with conversation and the delicate strains of live classical music. Paintings glowed under soft light. Laughter floated between polished glasses, and people looked effortlessly sure of where they belonged. Emily moved slowly through the crowd, clutching her small purse, absorbing the details, the brushstrokes, the colors, the faces around her that all seemed to know how to fit. For a moment, she thought about turning quietly to leave before Claire noticed she'd come. But fate rarely allows an exit that simple. Near a painting of a woman walking alone through rain, a voice beside her said, "You look like you understand that one." She turned. A tall man, dark hair, kind eyes, a quiet self-assurance, stood with a camera instead of a champagne glass. "Ryan," he said, offering an easy smile. "Photographer, Emily," she replied softly. "Just Emily." "You don't seem like someone who loves a busy room," he said after a pause. Her laugh slipped out before she could stop it. "You read that fast," he shrugged lightly. "It's my job to notice what others overlook." Their conversation unfolded as smoothly as if it had already been waiting for them. They talked about art and how it often said the things words couldn't. Ryan spoke of his photography, how he captured people unaware, moments of real emotion instead of posed perfection. Emily listened, drawn to his calm sincerity. He wasn't there to impress her. He was simply present, and somehow that was enough. A few minutes later, another voice joined them, bright and teasing. "Ryan, you're stealing all the good company tonight." Ryan laughed and turned. "Emily, this is Daniel, writer, traveler, all-around collector of stories." Daniel was all warmth and easy energy, the kind of person who made any space feel wider just by stepping into it. His laughter came easily, and his eyes carried the glint of endless curiosity. "A photographer and a writer," Emily said with a small smile. "That sounds like the start of something." Daniel grinned. "Maybe tonight is something." The three of them drifted toward the open balcony. Rain shimmered faintly against the skyline, city lights blooming like distant stars. Daniel spoke about his travels, about mornings in Irish fog and late-night coffees in tiny Parisian cafes, about strangers who became stories, and stories that became pieces of him. "You must have so many tales to tell," Emily said, fascinated. "I do," Daniel replied, his tone softening. "But not all stories should be written. Some are meant to be lived." Before she could answer, she heard a voice behind her. Warm, familiar, unexpected. "I knew it was you." The sound froze her for a heartbeat. She turned, and there he was. Mark. Her voice was soft, laced with disbelief. He smiled, and for a moment the room seemed to go still. "You haven't changed. Still look like you belong more in bookstores than at parties." She laughed, the years between them falling away in an instant. They hadn't spoken since college. 6 years vanished in a single glance. I can't believe it's been so long, she said. Moved back last month, he explained. Chicago lost its mystery. I saw you from across the room and thought, no way. You always swore you'd never leave Seattle. Maybe I was just waiting for the city to surprise me. Soon it was the four of them, Emily, Ryan, Daniel, and Mark, standing near the tall glass window overlooking the rain-slicked streets. The city glowed beneath them, endless and alive. Each man had a different presence. Ryan, steady and observant. Daniel, vibrant and full of wonder. Mark, nostalgic and quietly grounded. For Emily, it was as if each represented a piece of life she'd forgotten. To explore, to dream, to remember. Ryan asked about her work, and she told him she freelanced as a designer. It's creative, she admitted, but lonely sometimes. Most of my conversations are with my laptop. Daniel chuckled. That's exactly why nights like this exist. To remind you the world's still bigger than your screen. Mark nodded, thoughtful. Or sometimes, he said, his voice softer, people from your past show up to remind you who you used to be. His words struck a chord she hadn't realized still rang. As the night unfolded, Emily felt something inside her stir awake. The initial stiffness, the self-consciousness, all of it melted away. She laughed easily, shared stories she hadn't told in years. There was no pretense, no pressure, no noise in her mind, just the simple joy of connection. At one point, Ryan lifted his camera. Can I take your photo, just as you are now? She hesitated, then nodded. The soft click of the shutter seemed to echo in the air between them. Perfect, he murmured after looking at the screen. You have that look, a hint of someone standing right at the edge of something new. She didn't answer. But she could feel it too. An unnamed sense of shift blooming quietly inside her, small but real. As the hours slipped by, the music slowed. Guests began to leave, their laughter fading into the city night. Claire found Emily near the door, eyes bright. You look happy, she whispered. Told you this night would be good for you, Emily smiled, glancing toward the three men who had somehow made the evening something she'd never forget. Before leaving, Ryan handed her his business card but flipped it over first. On the back, in neat ink, he'd written, Every good story begins with a moment like this. Daniel promised to send her one of his articles, and Mark simply said, Don't disappear again. When she stepped outside, the rain had stopped. The city's wet pavement gleamed under the streetlights, reflecting back a softer world. Emily walked slowly to her car, the night air cool against her skin, a smile playing at her lips. She didn't know what tomorrow would bring, but she knew this. The evening, and the people in it, had become part of a story she wanted to remember. She turned once to look back at the gallery glowing quietly behind her and whispered, Maybe this was exactly the story I needed. And so began a night she would carry with her, one that would ripple forward in ways she couldn't yet see. The next evening, she couldn't help herself. The gala replayed in her mind like a favorite scene. She remembered Ryan's questions, Daniel's laughter, Mark's easy familiarity. Each had left a different kind of impression, threads woven together into something she hadn't realized she'd been missing. 3. New messages blinked on her phone. Ryan, I've got an exhibit downtown if you'd like to see what art looks like through my lens. Daniel, coffee soon? I owe you a story I didn't get to tell. Mark, dinner like old times? Emily read them all twice, smiling. After years of holding back, she didn't want to retreat anymore. She said yes to each of them, not for romance, not yet, but for life itself. She was ready to step back into the world that had gone quiet around her. Her first evening out was with Ryan. His small photography studio was bathed in calm light, the walls filled with moments suspended in time. A child chasing pigeons, an old woman reading by a rainy window strangers caught mid-laughter. They're all real, Ryan said softly. No posing, no pretending. Emily paused before a photograph of a young girl staring at the ocean. She looks like she's waiting for something, she murmured. Ryan nodded. Maybe she's waiting for herself. The answer stilled her. That was his gift, making every simple truth sound profound. They talked for an hour about art, risk, and the small beautiful things that people forget to notice. He told her how he left a corporate job because he didn't want to wake one day realizing he never even tried. His words sank deep. Emily admired his courage because she'd never been bold enough to take that leap herself. When she left, Ryan walked her to her car. "You've got that same look," he said gently, like someone about to start something new. His voice was quiet, but it lingered. The next day, she met Daniel at a cozy cafe overlooking Pike Place Market. He was already there when she arrived, his pen scratching across a notebook. When he saw her, his whole face lit up. "I was just writing about last night," he said, laughing. "That gallery reminded me of a story from Spain." And just like that, conversation began again, flowing with warmth, curiosity, and something that felt like possibility. Drawn in. He told her about a woman who traveled alone after losing everything, only to find happiness and unexpected kindness from strangers. "That story sounds like you," Emily joked. Daniel laughed. "Maybe it's all of us trying to find pieces of home wherever we go." They talked for hours about dreams, places they wanted to see, and the kind of peace that comes from being brave enough to start over. Emily shared her fear of stepping out of her comfort zone, and Daniel listened without judgment. "You don't have to change the world," he said. "You just have to stop hiding from it." When they said goodbye, Daniel gave her a folded piece of paper. Later, when she opened it, it was a quote scribbled in his handwriting. "Every journey starts with a single moment of courage." By the third evening, she met Mark at a small Italian restaurant near the waterfront. The place was familiar. It was where they used to go during college when they couldn't afford much but wanted to feel like adults. "Same place, same table," Mark said with a nostalgic smile. Time had changed him. His face looked older, but his eyes were the same, kind and steady. "You know," he said as they sat down, "I always wondered what happened to us. We just drifted." Emily nodded, stirring her coffee slowly. "Life happened," she said. "We got busy trying to become someone else." They talked about the past, about the plans they once made that never came true. Emily remembered how Mark used to stay up late helping her study, and how he'd always tell her, "You're meant for something beautiful." She had forgotten how much that voice meant to her. "I miss this," Mark admitted. "Talking to you feels easy again." Emily smiled softly. "Some things don't really change," she said. There was silence then, the kind that feels full rather than empty. Later that night, as they walked by the pier, the air was cool. The city lights shimmered on the water. Mark suddenly said, "You know, I thought I'd moved on from everything, but seeing you again reminded me that some people never really leave your heart." His honesty caught her off guard, and she didn't know what to say. She wasn't ready for love, not yet, but she couldn't deny that the warmth of his words stayed with her long after he left. The week passed in a blur, and Emily felt like she had lived 3 different lives in 3 days. Each of those men had shown her a different side of herself. Ryan reminded her of depth, of the beauty hidden beneath silence. Daniel reminded her of courage, that life was meant to be lived boldly. And Mark reminded her of roots, of the comfort in being known by someone who once understood her completely. But now she was torn. Each connection was special in its own way, yet none of them felt like the answer. She wasn't falling in love, she was waking up to life again, and that she realized was something she hadn't felt in years. One evening, she sat by her window, watching rain fall softly over the city. Her phone buzzed a message from Ryan saying he had a rooftop invitation for the weekend, small gathering of artists and friends. Daniel texted too, telling her he'd be leaving for Canada soon and wanted to say goodbye before his next trip. And Mark sent a short message that simply read, "I still owe you that sunset walk we missed in college." Emily smiled at her screen, not sure what to do next. The old version of her would have avoided it all, too afraid of the unknown. But something had changed. She wasn't afraid anymore. Maybe she didn't need to make a choice between them. Maybe she just needed to keep following where life led her, one honest moment at a time. That night, she looked at her reflection and realized she looked different. Not because of makeup or clothes, but because there was light in her eyes again. The kind of light that comes from being seen, heard, and reminded that you matter. Before sleeping, she wrote in her journal something she hadn't done in years. It's not about who I met, but what they made me remember that there's still more to feel, more to live, more to share. As she closed the notebook, her heart felt calm, but her mind raced with curiosity about what the rooftop evening might bring. She didn't know it yet, but that night would become the turning point. The moment when everything she thought she understood about connection, love and destiny would take an unexpected turn. And once again, Emily's story was about to unfold faster, deeper, and more beautiful than she could ever imagine. The sky over Seattle glowed gold and gray as the sun set behind the city skyline. Emily stood outside her apartment, waiting for the car Ryan had sent to pick her up. He'd invited her to a small rooftop gathering a mix of photographers, writers, and dreamers. He said she hesitated at first, but finally agreed. Something about the way he described it. A night where stories meet stars made it impossible to refuse. When she arrived, soft jazz music floated in the air. Fairy lights hung across the rooftop, casting a warm glow over the group of people scattered between tables, sipping coffee and wine. The city stretched endlessly below them, alive with lights. Ryan waved when he saw her. "You made it," he said, smiling. "I was starting to think you wouldn't," Emily smiled back. "I almost didn't," she admitted. "But then I remembered I promised myself I'd start saying yes more often." "Then tonight is a good start," he said. They talked for a few minutes before others joined the conversation. Ryan introduced her to a painter named Maya, who spoke about finding beauty in imperfection. Emily listened quietly, feeling inspired. But then, to her surprise, she spotted a familiar figure walking toward them. Daniel. He had texted earlier saying he might come to say goodbye before leaving for Canada, but she hadn't expected him to show up here. "I hope I'm not crashing the artist circle," he joked as Ryan laughed and hugged him. "You're always welcome," Ryan said. Emily felt a flicker of warmth seeing both of them, their two very different men who had unknowingly helped her rediscover herself. "Emily," Daniel greeted, smiling wide. "I was shopping to see you before I left. You made it just in time," she said, happy to see him, but unsure how to feel about the sudden overlap of worlds. Ryan stepped away to help a friend set up a projector. Leaving the two of them alone for a moment, Daniel leaned on the railing beside her, looking out at the skyline. "You know," he said softly, "cities look different right before you leave them. They feel like they're saying goodbye, too." She nodded. "You always see things poetically," he chuckled. "And you see them honestly. That's rarer than you think." Their quiet moment was interrupted by another voice, a voice that sent a rush of surprise through her. "Emily." She turned to see Mark walking in holding a small bouquet of flowers. "I didn't expect to find you here," he said. "Ryan mentioned this event, and I thought I'd stop by." For a second, Emily felt her heart race. All three men each tied to a different piece of her. Recent days were now standing on the same rooftop under the same glowing sky. It felt like the universe was setting something in motion. Something she hadn't planned for. Ryan returned, handing her a cup of warm tea. "You look like you've seen a ghost," he teased. "Just a few familiar faces," she replied with a small smile. The evening unfolded gently. Music played, conversations flowed, and laughter filled the air. Emily drifted between the three of them, sharing moments that felt natural and yet charged with emotion. Ryan talked about art and purpose. Daniel shared stories from his travels, and Mark asked about her dream streams she'd almost forgotten she had at one point. The rain began to fall, light and cold but refreshing. Instead of running for shelter, people stayed, smiling at the unexpected weather. Ryan raised his camera and began taking pictures. "Rain makes everything look more alive," he said. Emily stood beside him, watching the drops glisten in the light. He lowered the camera and looked at her. "You belong in moments like this," he said quietly. His words made her heart tighten. But before she could answer, Daniel joined them, holding 2 paper cups. "Coffee for the brave souls who stay in the rain," he said with a grin. The three of them laughed, and for a brief second, everything felt light and perfect. Later, the rain stopped, leaving the air fresh and cool. Ryan projected some of his photographs onto a white wall, and people gathered around to watch. One of the photos appeared an image of a woman standing in the rain looking both lost and hopeful. Emily recognized it immediately. Ryan spoke softly to the small crowd. "This picture," he said. It's about people who think they're alone, but are really just waiting for the right moment to be seen. His eyes found hers as he said it, and she felt something deep stir inside her when the lights dimmed again. She found herself standing near Mark. He'd been quiet most of the evening, simply watching. "You've changed," he said softly. "Maybe I just remembered who I was," she replied. Mark smiled. "You always had that light, Em. You just stopped noticing it." He looked at her then, not like a man trying to win someone's heart, but like someone who was grateful to see her shine again. "I used to think I missed my chance with you," he said gently. But maybe all this time it wasn't about timing. Maybe it was about growth. Emily's heart filled with mixed emotions. Nostalgia, gratitude, a quiet sadness, and something close to peace. She didn't know what to say, but she reached out and touched his hand for a second. "You didn't miss anything," she said. "You are part of the story that got me here." The night grew quieter as people began to leave. Daniel approached, suitcase by his side, ready for an early morning flight. "I should go," he said softly. "But before I do, promise me something." "What's that?" she asked. "Don't wait for life to happen again. Keep saying yes, even when it scares you." She smiled and nodded. "I promise." He hugged her briefly, warm, gentle, and full of understanding. "Take care of your story," he whispered. And then he was gone, disappearing down the stairwell like a chapter closing beautifully. Ryan came over a few minutes later, handing her a photo he had just printed from his small portable printer. It was the picture of her standing on the rooftop, rain falling lightly around her, smiling at something unseen. "Keep this," he said. "It's a reminder that you don't need to be anyone else to create something beautiful." Emily looked at the photo, and her throat tightened. "Thank you," she whispered. He smiled. "You gave me the moment. I just captured it." As the last few guests left, only Mark and Emily remained, standing by the edge of the rooftop, looking at the stars peeking through the clouds. The wind was cool, and the city shimmered below like a sea of stories. "You think nights like this mean something?" she asked quietly. "I think every night means something," Mark said. "But this one feels special." She nodded, watching a plane pass high above, perhaps carrying Daniel toward his next adventure. Ryan's laughter echoed faintly in the distance as he packed his equipment. Everything felt peaceful and full at once. In that moment, Emily didn't need to choose between them. She didn't need answers or promises. All she needed was the quiet truth that life had given her something priceless, a chance to feel again, to connect, to start over. As the lights flickered and the rooftop emptied, she stood there for a long time holding the photograph close to her chest. The night had given her more than she expected. It had given her back to herself and somewhere deep inside. Emily knew this night, this rooftop, this rain would stay with her forever. A memory that reminded her that even the simplest evenings can turn into the most unforgettable stories. The morning sunlight crept through Emily's curtains, brushing gently across her face. For a few moments, she stayed still, eyes closed, trying to hold on to the calm that last night had left behind. Her room was quiet, except for the soft hum of the city waking up outside. She reached for her phone, still lying on the nightstand, where she dropped it after getting home past midnight. 3 new messages waited for her. One from Ryan, one from Daniel, and one from Mark. Ryan's message came first. "You made last night feel special. The world needs more people who see beauty where others don't." She smiled softly, picturing his calm face behind the camera, his eyes always searching for meaning in the smallest details. The second message was from Daniel, sent just before dawn. "Crossing into Canada now. I'll miss Seattle, but I'll remember that rooftop. And the girl who reminded me that home isn't a place. It's a feeling." Emily felt a small ache in her chest, the kind that comes from a goodbye that means something deeper than words can say. The third message was from Mark. It was simple, just 5 words. Coffee today. Same place again. She stared at it for a while. Somehow, those words grounded her. No grand speeches, no poetry, just something real and familiar. She typed back, "Yes, see you there." After a warm shower, she dressed casually, jeans, a cream sweater, and her favorite boots. She didn't put on much makeup, just a little color on her lips. There was a lightness in her that felt new. As she drove through the cool morning streets, the city looked different, not louder or brighter, but more alive, as if she was finally seeing it clearly. When she walked into the cafe, Mark was already there, sitting by the window. 2 cups of coffee waiting. He looked up and smiled, the kind of smile that made her heart settle. "You look rested," he said. "I feel like I finally slept after months," she replied, sitting down. They talked easily at first about work, the weather, how strange it was that one night could bring so much change. Then Mark grew quiet. "You know," he said, looking out the window, "I kept thinking about what you said last night, that I didn't miss anything. That really stayed with me." Emily nodded. "I meant it. We'll cross paths for a reason. Maybe ours was just waiting for the right time." Mark smiled faintly. "Do you ever wonder if things happen exactly how they're supposed to?" "I used to think life was just a series of chances," she said. "But now I think it's more about choices, saying yes when everything in you wants to say no." He nodded, thoughtful. "You've changed, Em." "Maybe I just stopped hiding," she replied softly. They sat in silence for a while, sipping coffee, watching people hurry by outside. There was comfort in that silence. No pressure, no expectations. Just 2 people sharing a morning that felt peaceful. Before leaving, Mark handed her something, a small photo he'd printed from her social media profile years ago. One she barely remembered posting. It was from college, the 2 of them laughing, arms around each other. "Found this last week," he said. "I thought you'd like to have it." Emily smiled. "Thank you, Mark." He stood and said quietly, "Whatever happens, I'm glad we met again." She watched him walk out of the cafe and felt gratitude, not sadness, just thankfulness for how life sometimes circles back to remind you of who you've been. After coffee, Emily drove to the park near the waterfront. She sat on a bench overlooking the bay, the cold air brushing her face. For the first time in a long while, she didn't feel the need to rush anywhere. She took out her phone and opened the photo Ryan had given her, the one of her standing in the rain, smiling at something unseen. The image was simple, but it told the story of a woman rediscovering herself. She thought about Ryan's quiet strength, Daniel's restless spirit, and Mark's steady heart. Each of them had walked into her life at the right moment, not to fill a void, but to show her that she was still capable of feeling, hoping, and believing. Her phone buzzed again. A new message from Daniel. "Don't forget to write your own story." She looked up at the horizon, smiling. Maybe she already was. The afternoon passed slowly, filled with sunlight and the sound of distant waves. She stopped by a bookstore on her way home, picking up a blank journal. That night, she opened it and wrote, "I met 3 men who reminded me that life doesn't stop when things fall apart. It pauses, waiting for us to notice the beauty we've been walking past. They didn't change me. They reminded me of who I was before the noise." Her words flowed easily like water finding its path. She wrote about the art gallery, the rooftop, the rain, the laughter, and the quiet moments in between. She didn't write about love in the romantic sense. She wrote about connection, courage, and how people can come into your life for a single night and still leave footprints that never fade. Days turned into weeks. Ryan's photography exhibit gained attention. and one of his pictures, the one of Emily, was displayed in the city's art magazine with the caption, "The Woman Who Waited for the Rain." Daniel sent postcards from different countries, always signing them with a line of poetry. Mark and Emily met for coffee every once in a while, never rushing anything, just letting life move naturally. One chilly morning, as Emily walked through the same gallery where it all began, she stopped in front of a new painting, a woman standing beneath golden light, her face peaceful. The artist's note read, "Inspired by a stranger who reminded me that kindness still exists." She didn't know who painted it, but it made her heart swell. That night she sat by her window, the city lights reflecting in her eyes. She realized that her story wasn't about three men. It was about one woman learning to embrace life again. She whispered to herself, "The best stories aren't about finding love. They're about remembering that you can feel it." Outside, rain began to fall again, soft and rhythmic. She opened the window slightly, letting the cool breeze wash over her. It smelled like the same rain from that rooftop night, clean, calm, endless. Emily picked up her camera, a gift from Ryan she'd almost forgotten about, and took a picture of the raindrops clinging to the glass. In that moment, she smiled, knowing she was no longer waiting for her story to happen. She was living it. She closed her eyes, her heart full, her mind quiet. Life wasn't perfect, but it was beautiful in small moments, fleeting smiles and unexpected encounters. And that was enough. Somewhere between that quiet morning and the falling rain, Emily finally understood. Happiness doesn't come from others showing up. It comes from having the courage to open the door when they do. And that was how three men, a photographer, a traveler, and an old friend, turned one woman's ordinary night into an unforgettable story worth sharing.